Hello, everybody. It is July 4th here in the United States, which means it's not only America's birthday and my half birthday, it means that we are, believe it or not, halfway through 2026, just a few days past the halfway point, which means that it's time to look back at the best movies of the year so far. I have compiled a list of my top 10, also some runners up, and what the critics have thought the best movies of 2026 are so far. And the rules for eligibility are just that it was released here in the United States sometime during 2026. So there are some movies that were released internationally last year that are eligible for this list. And there are some movies that I saw at the Sundance Film Festival and that have premiered at other festivals that have not yet had their theatrical debut. That means they are not eligible for this list. So anything released from January 1st to June 30th. And before we get to my top 10, let's look at some movies that were very close to making my top 10. It's been an interesting year so far. Unlike last year, there weren't any movies that were real slam dunks for my top 10 of the year so far. So a lot of these movies could almost be interchangeable with some of the ones that did make the list. Some of the highlights of the year that were just short for me include The Drama. It was a movie starring Robert Pattinson and Zendaya about a couple about to get married when a dark secret from her past pops up. Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die is one that I got a lot of recommendations from you, from the viewers of the channel. It is a time travel caper starring Sam Rockwell. Very, very close to making my top 10. Also very close to making my top 10, Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie. This was another one that I watched by popular demand. And honestly, I think that if I had watched the actual series and the web show going back years and years, this probably would make my top 10. I came in pretty cold and enjoyed the movie just on that basis. But I think if I'd been a fan of the pre-existing show, I probably would have liked it a lot more. Pillion is a movie that opened, I believe, in the UK and perhaps elsewhere back in 2025. It opened here in early 2026. And I thought the performances in the film, especially the two lead performances from Alexander Skarsgård and Harry Melling, were very strong. This goes on the top of my list of don't watch with your parents. Or if you want to make your parents uncomfortable as well as yourself, then do watch it by all means. But it is a very unconventional, I don't even know if you call it a love story, a story of exploration, let's say. John Carney's latest film, Power Ballad, was very close to making my top 10. I'm a big fan of John Carney. It stars Paul Rudd as a small-time musician who meets up with an international superstar by chance at a wedding. He's played by Nick Jonas. And then complications ensue when the superstar's new song bears a striking resemblance to something he noodled out with Paul Rudd over a drunken night at a piano. John Carney makes great music-based movies. The Sheep Detectives is one that I know a lot of people would probably have on their top 10, and I really, really liked it. I thought it was a cute movie, and that's not meant to diminish it. An all-star voice cast, Hugh Jackman playing a sheep farmer, and Nicholas Braun in a role that I didn't think was going to be as big as it was, and it's not the kind of character I would have thought he'd have been good at playing, but he was actually very, very good in the film. I think you can watch this on Amazon Prime Video right now. Just kind of a delightful way to pass an afternoon. Tuner was the first movie that I saw when I went to Sundance this past year. It stars Leo Woodall and Dustin Hoffman. It starts off as kind of a character-based piece and turns into a crime drama, pretty much. And it's a really solid film. I don't think it got the release that it deserved. It's already winding down its time in theaters, but you should be able to watch it at home pretty soon. And then Toy Story 5 is a movie that I enjoyed. I had some thoughts on it, and I didn't enjoy it as much as a lot of other people did, but I did still enjoy it. I think that it was worthy of the legacy of the other Toy Story films if it didn't really match up, especially to the first three. But the worst Toy Story film is still better than most animated films out there. And with that, let's get to my picks for my 10 favorite movies of the year so far. Now, as always, these are not ranked in order of preference because I don't want to be locked into anything when we get to the end of the year. So I will be presenting them in alphabetical order. And the first movie that I want to talk about is one that I think was shamefully overlooked at the box office and was better than the movie that preceded it in the franchise, and that is 28 years later, The Bone Temple. I love what Nia DaCosta did with this movie, and I especially loved Ralph Fiennes in this movie. It is one of the all-time unhinged performances, but he has total control over his character. I thought it was a really great way to continue the story from 28 years later, but also spin it into a completely new direction. I know that some people didn't like it because of the jimmies in this movie and the fact that it was referencing a horrific thing that happened in the UK, and because the tone of 28 years later was so weird at the end with introducing those characters. I think that carried over a lot into this movie. It really isn't at all like 28 years later, but I found it to be a better movie and one that I enjoyed more. And if we're talking about revisiting films in this franchise, this is the one that I'm definitely going to look at. It is still very existential. You have that little tinge of horror, but it did a lot of things that really surprised me, and I wish that more people had watched it when it was originally in theaters. Up next is Backrooms, which I enjoyed. It kind of flirted being on and off the top 10, but I liked what Kane Parsons did with the movie. I liked the style that he brought to it, the tone, the energy, the vibe. Of course, it's based off the series of popular YouTube videos, and Kane Parsons has been part of this indie horror summer that we've seen. But I don't think that this movie is getting acclaim just because it has a young director or just because it is based off of a viral hit. It's got interesting things to say about the human condition, about human nature, about the lies that we tell ourselves, the consequences of those lies. I don't necessarily think that the message was driven home with maximum impact at the end of the film, but I do think that it's told in a very interesting way, very interesting stylistically, interesting tonally, featuring some great performances by Chiwetel Ejiofor and Renata Reinsve. There's just a lot to like in this movie. And like I said, there were so many films that were just on the cusp of being in this top 10 that I didn't really know whether they should be in the runner-up or the top 10. So I would often kind of went with movies that surprised me in many ways. And for that reason, Backrooms does eventually make this top 10 list. I don't think it's going to be there at the end of the year, but it was one of the more intriguing movies I've seen in the first 6 months of the year. Well, this one's going to make a lot of people angry, but I don't care. I really liked Disclosure Day. It's not as good as the best Steven Spielberg movies, but most of them aren't. I know that people had issues with the script, and I had some issues with the script, but I also thought that Steven Spielberg showed why he is one of the best filmmakers that's ever been in the game. I understand that I'm going to be in the minority on this, but I thought that the strengths of this film far outweighed the weaknesses. It is one of the most divisive films that I can remember since I started this channel, with most people falling on the side of not liking it at all. But I thought that Emily Blunt was fantastic in this film. Really the standout performance in the movie. Josh O'Connor was pretty good, but I think this was Emily Blunt's best performance ever. And there were some sequences in the movie, particularly in the middle of the movie, that I thought really exemplified what Steven Spielberg is able to do as a filmmaker still at this advanced stage of his career. Yes, I understand there are some things about the movie that were frustrating to some people. That's where we just have a different opinion. And I agreed with some people on other things, but it didn't overwhelm the strength of the filmmaking for me, and it puts Disclosure Day on my top 10 so far. Next up is a movie called The Furious, which is a Hong Kong action film from director Kenji Tanigaki, and it stars Miao She and Joe Taslim as two guys who are literally going to fight everybody they can in order to take down an underground crime syndicate. Yes, we have seen this kind of movie before. Yes, it's not exactly the most original plot in the world, but give me a well-executed action film about two guys on a mission who have to face impossible odds and come up with creative ways to beat up waves and waves of bad guys. And more often than not, that's the kind of movie I'm going to find really, really entertaining. And The Furious was a great watch for me from beginning to end. It does that thing that I love when I'm watching an action movie where it'll just pull off something so audacious, a stunt or a set piece or an idea for how to, or where somebody's going to fight somebody that I just wouldn't have thought of. And that genuinely surprises me. Sometimes it's the brutality of it. Sometimes it's the creativity of it. Sometimes it's both. This was just a really, really fun watch for me this year. And a really, really solidly done action movie. And it just goes to show you that movies don't have to be overly complex to be good. They just have to be well made. Next up is the last movie I watched, actually, before making this list. It's Boots Riley's latest film, I Love Boosters. I was a big fan of his first movie, Sorry to Bother You, and I was also a big fan of this film. It is similar to Sorry to Bother You in some ways. There is definitely some social commentary thrown in there, and it uses so many different ways and methods of filmmaking, different kinds of animation. Sometimes they use model shots, and I think it was to get around the fact that it had a lower budget. The production design in this movie is incredible. incredible. I actually hope that people remember it when we get to the end of the year. I thought that the performances were great, led by Keke Palmer. She is the leader of this group of shoplifters who are also called boosters. They're trying to make money by stealing all of these designer clothes. Demi Moore plays the most famous designer in the world, but then it gets mixed up with all sorts of things, including some drama at a Chinese factory. It gets sci-fi pretty much by the end of it. It starts off as sort of a comedy / social commentary. Then it takes a hard turn into sci-fi. Then it's kind of an action film. If you saw Sorry to Bother You, you know that Boots Riley really has one of the most unique ways of looking at the world and translating his worldview to film of any filmmaker working today. But I didn't find it alienating in any way. I didn't feel like he was making the movie just for him to kind of keep the audience at arm's length. I understood what his intentions were. I thought that a lot of it was really, really clever. It is a very, very funny movie, and almost every performance in the film adds to the overall product. I may see movies by the end of this year that I like more than I Love Boosters, but it's gonna be hard to find one that is more memorable than this one. And Boots Riley really just has such an incredible style. This is another one that I think was just kind of not put in a great release window for it to succeed. It didn't do well at the box office, but you can watch it at home now, and I think you very much should, because you're not going to see another movie like this all year. Next up is one that just barely makes this list, and that is The Invite, which is currently in limited release. It will be getting a wide release next weekend. It's from Olivia Wilde, who directed the movie and also co-stars in the movie with Seth Rogen, Edward Norton, and Penelope Cruz. And the trailers have already given away more than I want to give away about the film. When I saw it back in January, I really didn't know anything at all about it. And it was one of my favorite movie-going experiences at Sundance this past year. I said in my original review of the movie, or when I recapped my experience at Sundance, that I was glad that the screening I was in actually had open caption subtitles, because otherwise I would have missed a lot of the lines of dialogue. That's how many laughs are in this film. It is one of the funniest movies I've seen in a long time. I plan on going back when it does open here in Arkansas, because I want to see it again, not just to reevaluate it or to see if my original review holds up, but because I really, really enjoyed the movie. Seth Rogen and Olivia Wilde are married to each other. Edward Norton and Penelope Cruz are married to each other, and the two of them meet for a dinner party that takes some absolutely crazy turns. And one of the things I like the most about it is that not everybody in the film is necessarily playing to type. When you look at Seth Rogen's character, in many ways he is sort of the typical Seth Rogen character, but I think that in a lot of ways he's not. He's playing against what you might expect from him. And Edward Norton and Penelope Cruz particularly, you've never really seen anything from either of them, especially Ed Norton, with the shade that they're showing in this movie. It really is a movie that is built on a mounting series of interactions and getting to know these characters and understanding what their inner turmoil is, understanding what their sensitive spots are, and how all of those things come together in a very explosive way at this dinner party. If you like these sort of very small scale movies that mostly take place in one room, which is what The Invite does, it's all pretty much in this one apartment, this is a great example of that kind of movie, and I'm excited for more people to get to see it, because it really was a highlight for me this year so far. Next up is another Sundance movie for me. I just did a spoiler review for it on the channel a couple weeks ago. It's called Leviticus. It is a horror film about two gay teens who are basically inflicted with a curse to be stalked by an entity, and to each of them, the entity takes on the form of the other one. So you're basically being stalked by the person that you love the most in the world. I've already said so much about Leviticus in my Sundance coverage and in my review a couple weeks ago, so I won't say a whole lot more, other than the fact that this was a movie that was never not on this top 10 list. In this summer of low-budget horror, this one was kind of overlooked, but if you have a chance to check it out, I highly recommend it. It has kind of been dismissively, labeled as the gay It Follows, and there are some surface level similarities, but I think it's also a really, really effective horror movie on its own terms, featuring some really good performances. And I was glad when I went back to see it again just a few weeks ago that it held up from my first viewing. Speaking of the summer of indie horror, this is the one carrying the banner, Obsession. I don't know which review I've gotten more pushback on this year, my review of Obsession or my review of Disclosure Day, but I have thought about Obsession a lot since I saw it. And, I gave it in its good rating when it was first released, but I think it's even gone up a little bit more in my estimation. And it's because your brain kind of works in a weird way when you're reviewing a movie. There are certain things that kind of get stuck in your brain right when you're doing a review that kind of fade away a little bit over time. And then there's some things that you maybe don't think about that emerge in your mind over time. So I think, for example, that Backrooms got a higher rating initially if you just look at my scale than Obsession did, but I might flip them at this point. Yes, I did have some concerns and some criticisms a little bit over how the script for Obsession was structured and maybe the way that it told its story, but the technique of the film, the effect of the film has stuck with me over these last several weeks more than some of my qualms over how the story was told. But it was still easily a top 10 movie for me, and it's great to see a little indie movie like this not only holding its own against big franchise films like Star Wars, but actually doing better than those movies. That's great for movies, although maybe not so great for Star Wars. Next up is one of the big spring releases this year, Project Hail Mary. This, for me, was one of the most enjoyable kind of throwback movies that I've seen, in that it feels like one of those big movies of the 80s or 90s that was kind of made for everybody. It cost a lot of money, but also it seemed like everybody went to see it or wanted to go see it. It's available, I think, as of yesterday on Amazon Prime Video. It really is what I think blockbuster storytelling should be. It had style, it felt distinct. It didn't feel like it was made for the lowest common denominator or that it was a cookie cutter movie, but it was so accessible in how it told its story, in the characters, in that relationship between Rocky and Ryan Gosling's character. It had the big effects, it had the emotion, it had the heart, it had the spectacle. It had just about everything that you would want from a big budget blockbuster. Obviously, it took a lot of influence from the big movies, the sci-fi movies of the 80s and 90s, but especially the 80s. It's just a fun, enjoyable movie. Your grandmother went to see it. You could take your kids to see it. You don't see a whole lot of movies like that anymore, that kind of all audiences movie. Project Hail Mary did such a good job at being that kind of movie while still feeling like its own thing, and really one of my favorite theater-going experiences of the year. The last movie on my top 10 is one I did not get a chance to see in theaters because it came out when I was in Utah, and that is Send Help, which is the latest from director Sam Raimi. Sam Raimi's made a lot of different kinds of films, but I love when he makes nasty movies, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Send Help is not Sam Raimi's nastiest movie, but it is a movie where you can tell he delights in some of the awful things that happen to the characters, and kudos to Rachel McAdams and Dylan O'Brien, who both play their roles very well. And honestly, I would have been happy with this movie if it was just sort of a psychological battle of the wills on this island after a plane crash between this kind of hotshot CEO and this overlooked, basically assistant that had worked at the company forever. But then the movie surprised me. And, I see a lot of movies. It can be hard sometimes to surprise me and really catch me off guard. This movie caught me off guard with stuff that had been hiding in plain sight the entire time, and it does one of the best things that a movie can do when it surprises you. It makes you want to go back and watch the movie again from the beginning, because all of these things you go, oh, now that makes sense. Both of these lead characters are probably two of the most complicated lead characters that you can imagine. And what I love about Sam Raimi, and I think one of the reasons why he wasn't afraid to do nasty things to both of these characters, is that it's hard to know who the good one is and who the bad one is. It kind of shifts throughout the entire movie. You're on one side, then the other side. Maybe you should be on nobody's side. This was just a really, really enjoyable film. Obviously not to people who don't like, blood and some kind of gross stuff. But for somebody like me who doesn't usually mind that stuff, as long as it's not, too excessive, although with Sam Raimi, it's always excessive. This was just a fun watch. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to see it in theaters with an audience, but I sure had a great time watching it on my couch. So those are my picks for the 10 best movies of the year so far in 2026. Before I go, let's take a look at what critics have selected as the 10 best movies of the year so far. This is based off of the average rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So not the tomato meter, but the 0 to 10 rating that critics have given all these movies. And thankfully, Rotten Tomatoes has restored that feature to their website. And let's start with all releases. So these are either movies that were put in limited release or wide release. The 2026 with the highest average rating so far this year is Blue Heron with an 8.9. This is a Canadian film from writer-director Sophie Ramvari, and I actually did watch it with the expectation that it could potentially be on my top 10. I ended up enjoying it, but I didn't love it as much as many other critics seem to have loved it. It is a very intimate story about this family that is undergoing a crisis with one of the family members, an older brother who obviously has some unaddressed mental health issues, and it is an interesting combination of looking back, looking forward, of memory, of what you wish you could have done. I thought that it was a really, really well-made film. It just didn't quite graduate to that next level for me. Next is Nirvana, the band, the show, with an 8.6 average score out of 10, the second best rating for any movie released in 2026. Then we have Epic, Elvis Presley in Concert, which was done by Baz Luhrmann. He assembled a lot of never-before-seen Elvis Presley concert film. This was almost on my runners-up list, my honorable mention list. Really, the first half of the movie I thought was great. It ran a little bit out of steam in the second half for me, but if you like Elvis Presley, I think this is an essential film in the Elvis Presley canon. Next is Silent Friend, which gets an 8.4 out of 10. It's from Hungarian filmmaker Ildikó Nyedi, and it's a movie about a tree and the people around that tree across multiple generations. I've heard good things about the movie, haven't had a chance to see it. Next is the documentary Andre is an Idiot, which got an average score of 8.2. This actually played at Sundance 2025, and it is an exceptional documentary. Maybe it should have gone on my runners-up list. It is heartbreaking because it's about the artist Andre Ricciardi and his battle with cancer, but it is one of the most sad and yet also life-affirming documentaries I've ever seen. Next is Ghost Elephants, which gets an average score of 8.2. This is from director Werner Herzog. It's a documentary about searching for an undiscovered species of elephant in Africa. Project Hail Mary's up next with an average rating of 8.2. Then we have Pillion with 8.1. All That's Left of You also got an 8.1. This follows 3 generations of a Palestinian family. Two Prosecutors got an 8.1 average rating. That's from Ukrainian director Sergei Loznitsa, following a lawyer seeking justice for a political prisoner in Stalin-era Germany. And Obsession rounds out this list with an average critical score of 8.1. Among movies that got a wide theatrical release, Epic, Elvis Presley in Concert leads the way with a score of 8.5. Then Project Hail Mary with an 8.2 and Obsession with an 8.1. At number 4 on the wide release list is God Is from director and writer Alicia Harris. This is the only one I think on this list that I didn't get a chance of the wide releases to see, but I'm going to see it before the end of 2026. Then we have 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. Audiences may have snubbed it, but it was critically acclaimed. It had an average score of 7.8. Toy Story 5 ties it, also with an average score of 7.8. And then the other film from Pixar this year, Hoppers, with a critical average score of 7.7. I Love Boosters comes in next with an average score of 7.5. And then tied with an average score of 7.4 are Send Help and Backrooms. And those are my picks for the best movies of 2026 so far. What do you think? Are some of your favorites on my list? Are some of your favorites not on my list? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, stay tuned right here. We've got 6 more months of the year and a bunch more movies left to come out. I'm excited to see what movies are going to break into my final top 10 for the year. There's a lot of high-profile films and probably some surprises in there too. If you're not subscribed to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell so you're notified when I upload a new video. But most of all, thank you for watching this video. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.